Have you ever been denied a job for having a criminal conviction on your record? Well, I have good news for you. There's a law that's not really well known in Arizona that lets you seal your old criminal cases here. Hello, my name is Darren Woodfork, and I'm an attorney here in Scottsdale, Arizona. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about a little known law here in Arizona that allows people to seal an old criminal case and basically get a new lease on life, get to start over and go in and basically say if there's any form that says you've been convicted of a crime, you can check the box truthfully no. Hello, and again, my name is Darren Woodfork. I'm an attorney here in Scottsdale, Arizona. At my firm, I specialize in sealing old criminal cases. I restore gun rights here at my firm, and I also do personal injury work in the form of car accident cases here on the Arizona streets. But like I said, today I'm going to talk about Arizona's law. It's the motion to seal law here. The statute, if you ever want to look it up, it's 13911. It just started back in 2023 here in Arizona for Arizona citizens. And basically what it is that you can you if you've had a case that qualifies, basically you can file a motion with the court here in Arizona. And if the judge grants the motion saying that they're going to seal or erase your old case, then basically whenever you go into a job application or a rental form or a loan application, something like that, you can say no if it asks if you've ever been convicted of a crime. Now, the reason why this law is I think it's the best law that I've ever seen here in Arizona, and I've been practicing law here for 26 years. It's the best law I've ever seen. And the reason why is because we've always had kind of an expungement law here, kind of like we called it a motion to set aside. And it's still here. And it was the motion that we would file back in the day to get people's rights restored. And that was like the right to sit on a jury, right to hold elective office, right to carry a gun, things like that. We could only file a motion to set aside the old conviction back in the day. And so before this new motion to seal law, basically, after you did that, when anybody looked up your record, they would see that you had an old case, but they'll see that you had that old case vacated or dismissed or dropped or something like that. That's what the notation would be in the public records. Well, now with this new motion to seal law, if the judge grants the motion, the actual case is gone from public records here in Arizona. They absolutely erase it from public records here in Arizona. That's why it's such a big deal with this new law and why it's so different than the way it used to be. And also it helps. One of the things that if you run your FBI background check, you'll see that it'll have all your contacts with law enforcement ever. And even if you weren't charged with a case, it'll show that you were arrested by some police department. Or even if you were arrested and charged someplace and the charges were dropped, that would still show up too in your records. Well, now under this new law in Arizona, you can have all those things. You have the arrest, you have the charges dropped, or you can have the conviction all sealed from public records under this new Arizona law. Again, another reason why it's so good here and why, like I said, I think it's the best law I've ever seen. Um, and so it's like you have this law where you can in the law specifically, like in the actual letters in the words of the law, in the statute, it'll tell you that you can say no on forms that ask you if you've been convicted of a crime here in Arizona. And again, that was always something, people would always ask me after they had their case set aside. We could never tell them that you can't say no on that form if the judge application or the employment application asks you if you've been convicted of a crime. But now you can, and that you can now because the statute says you can. So that's why the law is so good. Again, a lot of people don't know, even though the law has been going on for about almost 3 years now, not everybody's taking advantage of it. And if you have an old felony case out there that's bothering you or it's been, stopped you from getting opportunities, you definitely should look into getting the case sealed if possible. Now, the reason why I say, if possible, is that some cases, some old cases, cannot be sealed here in Arizona. Once they said, yeah, you can, seal your cases and get a new lease on life, they excluded some cases that were, that you people have committed. And these are things that you probably would just, you would probably just think about normally, or it'd be obvious to you. And that's like, murder cases, armed robbery cases, cases involving children, those type of cases. Any case really where you did a whole bunch of like jail time or prison time, those cases you won't be able to seal, obviously. So that's, that's again, I think that's kind of, yeah, again, I think that's obvious. But what is kind of surprising though, there's a lot of cases. I would say the other, 3,000 or so cases, they are eligible to get sealed if you qualify. All things being equal, I guess. But again, it's amazing that these cases that even if you have like a gun case, depending on the nature of the case, it could possibly be sealed. Now, there's a lot of discretion with the judges, but under the law, you might be able to file it. Now, the judges, they may, in their discretion, deny it, but they're surprising how many cases that they will let, you could file on it, file in the first place, I should say. Um, and so also the next thing about, most cases will qualify to be sealed. The next thing is like the waiting periods and basically how long you have to wait before you can file a motion to seal your record, because you can't do it just like the old motion to set aside when you ask to restore your gun rights or your civil rights, things like that. There was always a waiting period after your conviction, before you could file a motion to restore your rights. And the same thing here in this case, when you're asking the court to seal, you have to wait a period of time. And you have to wait a period of time after you finish paying your fines, after you finish paying your restitution, after you got done doing all the things that you needed to do. Maybe taking the ignition interlock device off your car in a DUI, things like that. Once you satisfy, you got done with all the penalties of your case, then the clock starts. And so once the clock starts, you have different timelines that you have to wait. Now, starting from the bottom, if you have like a class 2 and class 3 misdemeanor here, which is the lowest crimes in Arizona, that's kind of like a shoplifting case in municipal court, something like that. If you have one of those convictions, you have to wait 2 years before you file the motion to seal. And then if you're involved with a class 1 misdemeanor, which is still a misdemeanor, but it's a little bit more serious here in Arizona, and that's usually your DUI case, soliciting prostitution cases, things like that, in city court. Those type of cases, you have to wait 3 years before you file a motion to erase that old case. Those are the bottom cases that you have the timelines that you have to wait. The lowest timelines you have to wait. Actually, if you are not convicted, but you are arrested for a case, you don't have to wait at all as far as there's no time waiting in order to file the motion to seal. These are just on convictions. And so, so those are the misdemeanor convictions. On the felony convictions, a class 6 is like the lowest felony here in Arizona. So if you have a class 6, class 5, class 4, those felony convictions, you have to wait 5 years since the time you got done paying your fines, restitution, all the penalties of your old case. And then finally, the last and the more serious cases here in Arizona, which are the class 3s and the class 2 felonies. Those are the most serious cases where you can still file this motion to seal. You have to wait 10 years and before you can file, and that's the timeline also. And then also, if you have more than one case, you have to wait the total time of both timelines. So if you have two class 6 cases, you have to wait 5 years both times for a total of 10 years. So that's what happens when you have like multiple cases that you're trying to get sealed here in Arizona. Um, Now, also, it's once you file the motion, once the judge signs the order, and once your case is sealed from the record, exactly what does it do? And basically, once the judge signs the order to seal your old record, they send out the order to the Arizona Public Records and basically instructs public records to erase or seal that old case from their rolls. And then what that does in practice, and again, I don't know like the technology of everything, but like when people do an online background search, they're getting their information and they're scraping from Arizona Public Records. So if Public Records doesn't have your old conviction, then they won't be able to scrape it. And so that's basically what the new law does, practically speaking, in the technology part of it, in technology speaking. And then once it's out of the public records, again, not only can you say that you've never been convicted of a crime, if the people who are looking to hire you for a job or rent you an apartment or give you a loan or any of those things where they ask if you have a criminal history, if they do look it up in the public records, they won't be able to find it because it's been sealed. And so, again, that's what's so good about this law. Now, sometimes, and I've been doing this now for 3 years, I started filing these motions probably a week after the law started in January 2023. The practical aspect of it, and this is the technology part. I mean, after my clients got their motions sealed, sometimes they had to send proof of that, or proof of the judge's order granting, granting their motion to seal it. They had to send proof of that to like website companies and servers and things like that, and in host and all that, to make them take that record off their like online, criminal search site or whatever it is. And so sometimes that it was like, that technology part of it takes a while to kind of make its way through the system. But that's the practical thing that I saw. But the judge in the law explicitly says that they tell Maricopa County Public Records to seal the old case. And that's what happens. Now, once the case is sealed, you have, like I said, the case is sealed. You don't have to tell anybody. However, there's a couple exceptions to that, and it's written right there in the law. The biggest exception for my concern is that if you apply for a job for like a fingerprint card, like if you want to be a teacher or law enforcement, maybe if you want to work in like healthcare, things like that. If you have to fill out a fingerprint card, you do have to tell them that you've had your old case sealed. You have to tell them either that you've had your old case sealed, or you tell them about your old case. And so whenever there's like a fingerprint clearance card at issue, you will have to disclose the old sealed case. And that's the biggest exception that I've came across in the last 3 years under this law. That's where impacts most people. There's another kind of series of exceptions in the law that I haven't really seen a lot, but it basically means that if there's a handful of cases, like if you're trying to get a job, like say a banking job, you have to tell them if you have an old fraud conviction. Or if you're trying to work at a child care facility, you have to tell them about an old like abuse case. If the old case is connected somehow with the new job you're applying for, you have to tell the new job that you've had that old conviction sealed. So like I said, there's about seven different jobs or professions that if the old case is related to it, you would have to tell them about the old case or tell them that you had the old case sealed. So those are the biggest exceptions to this law. Again, it's a fantastic law. And all this, I mean, those exceptions really only take into account probably 3%, 5% of the jobs out there. The other 95% of the jobs, you absolutely say no, that you've never been convicted of a crime. And that's what's so good about this law. Now, with all that said, I have seen some mistakes that people have made. Oftentimes, people file the motion on their own without the help of a lawyer or somebody like that, and they try to file the case on their own, and they get denied. And the three biggest reasons I've seen that people have been denied is first, they don't wait enough time. Now, like I said, there's the rules on the books, which is like the black letter law. That's basically saying if you have a class six case, in a class six felony, you have to wait 5 years before you file a motion. Well, sometimes people will wait 5 years in a day or 5 years in a month. And then they'll file their motion to seal, and the judge denies it. Basically, the judge will say, in their own discretion, there hasn't been enough time for them to see that you're a law-abiding citizen and that you won't be in trouble anymore and things like that. Because the judges have, 100% discretion. There was a case, maybe last year, maybe 2 years ago, where they're basically the Court of Appeals said that the judges, even though the law on the books said, there's these rules, the judges still have discretion, within those rules to make their own calls. And one of the things, and while I'm thinking about it, is that, you can file a motion for, say, a class four attempted, old class four attempted misconduct involving weapons case. And so you have class four, you wait 5 years and you file a motion to seal that old case. Well, I've seen a lot, probably maybe not 50%, but I've seen a handful of cases where the judges deny those misconduct involving weapon cases because they're always kind of weirded out by gun cases, weapons cases. So again, it's in the law. You absolutely have the right to file a motion to seal an old class four felony. They don't exclude weapons cases in most scenarios, but the judges, when they see it and they see a gun case, sometimes if they see a DUI case, they get kind of weird too. But definitely when they see gun cases, they will kind of like use their own discretion and deny the motion to seal. So that's the number one thing is that people just don't wait long enough to file a motion. And I tell people when they call my office, I'll ask them, one of the first questions I ask is how long ago was the conviction? And how long ago did you finish completing your fines? Because I'll know, like I said, depending on kind of what the case was, how much time will have to have been elapsed before we would have a good chance at the judge granting the motion. That's the first thing. Second thing is, which is kind of understandable, and that's that you don't pay off your fines and you don't pay off your penalty, your restitution, things like that, or you don't do one of the requirements that you had to do, like at sentencing. And it's understandable in the sense that people are calling me and they're saying that they had an old case back in 2003, and they completely forgot that the day that they were in front of the judge in 2003, the judge said you had to pay this $50 fine to the probation department, and they never did. And so now, if you file a motion and you have that $50 fines out there, the judge will deny the motion to seal. And so you have to make sure that all those fines and everything are paid off. One of the first things that they do, I'll talk about this when I talk about the process of what goes on after you file the motion, is one of the things that they do is the judges will ask the Maricopa County Financial, or I guess any county, wherever you file your motion, they'll ask the financial division, is there a zero balance? Have they paid off all their fines from that conviction? And if they're not, then that will cause the judge to deny the motion. And so that's that. And then, like I said, and then the final thing, the biggest mistake I've seen why people get their motions denied is that they don't give enough like supporting evidence when they file a motion. I mean, it's not really just filing the motion to seal the case or filling out a form to seal the case. You really have to give the judge evidence and exhibits of your good character. You have to give them good character witness letters. You have to give letters from your family, your friends, your job, your church. You have to do all that stuff to show the judge, that you're a good person. You've been a good person since you got out of jail that way back when, or got off probation way back when. You want to give them enough supporting evidence. And a lot of times, if people have their motion to seal denied, I'll ask them, what did they do in support? And they'll say nothing. And I'll say, well, that's why it was denied, because the judge didn't have any supporting evidence for your motion. Because what they do is they'll get all the bad stuff from the prosecutor, because the prosecutor weighs in on the motion. So the prosecutor is going to say, what was it, the police report, all the bad stuff. So you have to have stuff on the other side to balance that out. And people don't. So. And the problem with all that is, the problem with these mistakes, I should say, is that if you get your motion to deny, your motion is denied, you have to wait 3 years before you can refile and try again to have your case sealed. And that's written right there in the law also. So just keep that in mind. Now, like I said, the process itself, when you file the motion, right now, it takes about 6 to 9 months to get a decision from a judge, depending on what county you file it in. And what happens is once you file it, the judge gives the prosecutor's office, the prison system, the probation department, and then the financial division of the county, they gives them 60 days to respond to this motion. Basically, they send out the notice to all those people saying, so and so filed a motion to seal their old case. How were they when they were in jail? How were they when on probation? Do they have any fines out there? And they wait for input from the judge or from all those people, and they get 60 days before that's due. And so it's going to be like a minimum of 60 days in any case. And now, because the courts are so backed up, it's about six months to about nine months to get a decision on a motion to seal your old case. And you might be wondering what the prosecutors say when they do, because like I said, the minute you file the motion to seal your old case, the judge will ask the prosecutor for their input. And the prosecutor is going to, if there's any victims in the old case, for sure, the prosecutor is going to try to contact the victims. They'll look at the police report, see what's in the police report, maybe ask the cops or the detectives what they think about this. And then, then they'll file a motion. Sometimes they'll file a motion, or sometimes they'll ignore your motion. Sometimes they'll file a motion with the court, basically saying, Judge, we looked at everything. We've seen that. We've talked to the victim. We talked to people. We have no position. We're not objecting to it. The person has no fines. He qualifies under the law. We take no position. So most of the time, the prosecutor's office takes no position when you file a motion to seal here in Arizona. So that's good because, like I said, they could object to it, and then you're basically fighting them. Fight a real big adversarial process, essentially. So they usually don't. They basically say, like I said, they'll just leave it up to the court. Basically, they'll say, "Judge, it's up to you," essentially. And so that's pretty much the whole process right there to seal your old case. That's the big survey. I mean, there's more details that go involved in it. And like I said, I've learned a lot from the last 3 years of filing motions here in Arizona after like reading the judge's opinions and seeing kind of, the cases that we had denied, why the judge denied them. I would say we probably are successful 80% of the time when we file the motions. That's because I screen most of the cases I take, in the sense that I really don't take a case if I don't think there's a chance of the judge granting the motion. Every now and then I get some clients who kind of, they want to go over my advice, and I say, look, your chances of getting this case sealed are low, but they say they don't care. They just want to try. And I'd say about half the time we've done that, we've been successful, pleasantly surprised. But like I said, a lot of times if somebody calls my office and they say they have an old kidnapping case back in 2005, I'd say, well, the judge is just going to deny that. So don't waste your money or your time filing it. You can always file it on your own. I guess that's the last thing I'll leave you with. Sometimes people ask me in my comments here on the channel, they'll ask me, can I do this on my own? And just like anything in the law, you technically can do anything, on your own. And then, in fairness, I think if you have a small case, a DUI, no, well, not DUI, if you have a marijuana case, say from 20, 25 years ago, you could probably just fill out the form, file it. You don't need any supporting evidence. You don't need to write anything specifically, particularly in the motion, and the judge will probably just grant it. So if it's a super small case like that, you don't need a lawyer. But anything else, I mean, you're probably better off having a lawyer just to make sure, one, to answer your questions, and two, to kind of make sure there's nothing that's going to raise the eyebrow of the judge when you file a motion. And so that's that. Obviously, obviously I'm a lawyer. I want you to hire me, but at the same time, like I said, if you don't need a lawyer to file it, or if you're just wasting your time and your money because the judge would never grant your motion, I tell you that also. So, anyways, hope that helps. Thank you for watching the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. If you have any questions, if you live here in Arizona, you have an old Arizona case, which is important. I don't know if I said that earlier. Is even if you live out of Arizona, if you live in another state, but if you have a case in Arizona, you can still file a motion here to seal that old Arizona case. It doesn't work the other way, though. It doesn't work if you have an old case outside of Arizona, but you live in Arizona now. It doesn't work like that. You have to file. This law wouldn't apply to you because your case is outside of Arizona. This law only applies to Arizona cases, Arizona jurisdiction. Again, this law is Arizona Revised Section 13911. I have a ton of videos on this channel about the law when it first started. And now I make this 3 years later after, like I said, after filing probably close to 100, maybe 70 of these motions in the last 3 years. But anyways, again, thanks for watching. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Leave any comments down below. And I will talk to you next time. Thanks.